welcome back to Crafty Meraki's YouTube channel. My name is Aditi and today I am inspiring you all with the You Inspire Me set from Crafty Meraki. I am using the stamp, stencil and the die to create a slimline card. Now, I personally love creating slimline cards and I think this offbeat shape really has a larger canvas to explore and create unique cards. So a standard slimline card is 8.5 inches by 3.5 inches. My white card mat is slightly smaller than the black one. So the black mat is 8.5 by 3.5 inches. The white one is 8.25 by 3.25 inches. I am beginning with just aligning some paper on my stamping platform and I will use a light gray ink, so I am using limestone from Altenew to stamp two of the floral clusters from the stamp set. I want to stamp them with a light ink because I am going in for a no line coloring look, and that's the reason why this time I am not using black. I am stamping two of the bigger floral clusters and I stamp about three or four of the smaller clusters, but I don't end up using all of those. You will see by the end of the video, but I like to just have extra floral clusters because for a card like this I don't want to later run out of having images that I needed for layering. So I like to finish stamping all the outlines first, and once that's done I can then begin coloring using the coordinated layered stencils. So just aligning the first base stencil with the bigger floral cluster, I am using some shades of pink from my Altenew ink set. So I'm using the Spring Bouquet ink collection. So my base layer is with baby pink and I am using a blending tool just to lay out that baby pink through the base layer of the stencil to nicely color all the floral images of this cluster. I repeat the same process with the smaller floral cluster and then I go on to repeat it with all the stamped images. I think it's just very easy to go stencil by stencil, repeating that process on all the images once and for all, instead of working through all the layers on each cluster and then repeating the same process on the next one. So with that, I am just continuing and adding the base color and finishing that on all the clusters. Now for the second layer, I am using fuchsia and I am repeating the same process using my blending brush. I am picking up ink from the ink pad and nicely gently rubbing that through the second layer of the stencil to begin creating that shading and depth on the floral clusters. Pretty much the same process. I will do this for each of the cluster step by step, making sure that all the clusters once and for all have my second color of the fuchsia all down in place. Now I like to finish coloring the flower first, so I am just skipping the stencil with the leaf layers and I'll come back to that later. But I'm using magenta with a smaller blending tool this time because the grooves or the area to stencil is smaller. So just going in with my smaller blending tool, I am laying out the magenta ink on my floral cluster and you can see how much depth shading that brings into our floral cluster. It instantly just brings it to life, and I think with the gray ink, the no line coloring is just adding such a unique and delicate touch to this. So I am going to just repeat the same process on the smaller floral cluster and all the additionally stamped images to make sure that all the floral clusters are complete with the ink blending using the 3 stencils for this. And now that the flowers are complete, I can go back to the previous stencil and start coloring the leaves. So I am aligning the stencil to color in the base of the leaves, and I am using line for the first layer to nicely give a colored layer to the leaves. I think the fact that I'm using inks from one single coordinated set really helps because these shades of the green go perfectly well with these shades of the pink. So repeating the same process, first adding the base color of lime on the bigger floral cluster. I then go on to the smaller floral cluster and add the lime color to that. And then I am going ahead and repeating that on all the stamped images. For the second layered stencil for the leaves, I am using fresh leaf to bring in a little darker, intense shade to those leaves, but just in the same color family again. So it adds that element of depth and shading that we need to get our floral clusters all complete with the coloring. So the stencil really makes it so easy and effortless to create realistic floral clusters. And now all that is colored, I am just going to use the coordinated die and die cut all of these floral clusters and be back. Now that I have all the elements cut, I am ready to start building my composition. The idea that I had in mind was something of a secret garden to really create a nice card with floral clusters all around, creating this illusion of almost as if there is a pathway in the center and we are surrounded by beautiful blossoms with spring in mind. So I'm using foam tape to create depth and dimension, and beginning with the bigger floral clusters, I just adhere that to one side of the card, having some elements pop out and overhang, and overlay the second bigger cluster right next to that, and that just creates a nice first step for me to start. I am trimming off the overhangs because I will end up using all of these back in my card. I want to have bigger floral clusters at the bottom and the side and have a narrower border at the top, so that also brings in this idea of continuity, almost like these flowers are endless, all over, all around us. So I think with that idea, I am just playing, and once I'm happy, I adhere that. You will see me lift it up and change the position simply because I feel like it looks better the other way. So it's just a process of playing and exploring and seeing what works best for you. um, I take my time with this because this is the main part of this card, laying out the floral elements, just seeing which element looks good which way. And once I'm happy, once I've decided that yes, this is what is working, I then stick to that. I still have in mind this idea of creating that central illusion. So at the first, I was thinking, the top layer, I could just add in the overhangs and glue them. But then I decided that I would want foam dimension all around, creating this nice floral border for my card. Like I was saying, I didn't use all the smaller floral clusters, the one I've just laid in the center. I don't really use that because that's the space for the sentiment as well. And every time I finalize something, I do turn and cut off the overhangs. And then wherever I need to, I go back in and add extra foam tape just so that everything is adhered well. And once I have the major chunk of my composition ready, then putting in the smaller overhang elements at the top is quite simple. I do cut out thin tiny strips of the foam tape for those smaller elements and use those to adhere and continue creating my floral border at the top. So I am quite happy with the way that looks, and I think all this needs now is a few splatters and a sentiment. So I am going in with black acrylic ink splatters and just adding those all around, which creates a nice element of pop. and picking nice sentiment from the same stamp set and stamping that right in that central place that I had left empty to complete this card. So with that done, I am really happy with the result, and this is a closer look at my card. I really hope this has inspired you and given you ideas to venture out. And as you notice, this is a horizontal orientation slimline card. Most often we end up making vertical, but I think this is just giving you another idea of how you could stretch your muscles and create something unique and new. Do leave your comments in the description box below. I love reading them. And until the next time, take care and bye bye.